Hey guys, MTBtrigger here. Welcome back to the EXFIL BootCAMP series. Today we're going to be talking about my top 7 inventory and stash management tips. It's probably more like 10 with all the bonus tips that are kind of attached to these, but we're going to say it's the top 7 for now. If you're just getting into Tarkov, if you're looking for more in-depth conversation about it, make sure you check out the EXFIL podcast. It's a weekly show. And if you're looking for me, you can find me on Twitch a couple days a week playing Tarkov and a couple other games. But outside of that, let's get into it. So my number 1 tip when it comes to stash management is breaking down your guns the right way. So let me show you what I'm talking about. So a lot of times, and I know you're out there, you probably have tons of guns, ammo, all kinds of magazines. But there's a lot of ways to save space in your stash. And specifically, the one I'm talking about is most guns, you can actually remove the magazine and the pistol grip and save a lot of space. So let me show you what I'm talking about. So for example, on this EXFIL, if we double click it, you can actually take out the magazine and you can take out the pistol grip and you're going to save space. It's going to actually reduce it by half. So just right there, we save 2 slots. Now, most firearms that are in Tarkov can actually do that. There's a couple other things to always check for. If you right-click the gun and it has this fold option, you can fold it, save another spot, and now we're down to 1 spot. Now, I know if you're a new player out there, you're probably saying, well, how do I know what goes with what? Or if I take that gun in or I move my inventory stuff around too much, I'm going to create problems for myself. And they've added something into the game that is super useful for this. So if your inventory gets really disorganized and you're like, man, I took all these magazines off, I took these pistol grips off, I went and did a scav raid and brought all this stuff back and it just got messed up. You can double click any weapon attachment, magazine, foregrip, pistol grip, whatever. And if you hover over this little caret, it's going to tell you what it's compatible with. And better than that, you can see that tells you where it's at. So for example, this EXFIL pistol grip, it says compatible with all of these EXFILs that I have, and it says that I have 1 in my stash, and it says I have 6 in my equipment. So I know that those ones in equipment, those are in a bag or a weapons case, or they're stored somewhere deeper in my inventory, but I know that in my stash somewhere this pistol grip is compatible with a gun. Same goes for magazines, you can double click those. And it's going to tell you that it's compatible with more because these mags work for the VSS and the EXFIL. So again, if you get confused or you go into a bunch of fights, you lose some guns, you take some guns out, and you're not sure what's what, make sure to use this little compatible with tab. It's really helpful if you don't know exactly what goes with what. So don't feel bad about that. Use what the game gives you to figure it out. So tip number 2. Keep stuff for guns nearby. You'll notice here that the way I organize my guns is I will typically keep the gun, the magazines, and then any ammo that goes with that gun if I'm going to use it right nearby. And it's just for easy management, easily getting into the stash. Now, everyone's going to come up with their own style and where they want this stuff in their inventory. I don't care if it's a vertical gun, horizontal gun, whatever. If you keep your magazines, ammo, and guns near each other, that's usually the hardest one to figure out. So I recommend just keeping them close together. That way, when you're ready to go into raid, you just throw all this onto your character and you're good to go. Tip number 3, I like to call it bagception. So you can actually store bags inside of bags inside of bags. Now, personally, I like to keep big backpacks. And I'm at a stage in the game where the smallest backpack I'll take into a raid is a scav backpack or a Burkett. Now, again, new players, if you have smaller bags than this, feel free to do the same thing, but just make sure it's in descending order. So you want to have your biggest bags up top, and then you're going to end up with your smallest bags at the bottom. But you'll notice if you click into a bag, you can actually fit the same size bag or smaller indefinitely into your inventory. So you notice here I'm clicking a boatload of times because I have a ton of scav backpacks and Burketts that I've collected over time. So the more of these that you collect, you can keep stacking them up so you never run out of bags. And I use a small backpack, which for me, again, is the scav backpack or Burkett. And you can keep clicking through them like that because you can only ever have 4 inventory windows open within your stash. So it's only going to have the last 4 windows you opened. So if you ever have a bunch of stuff open and you're just trying to get back to your stash, if you hit escape 4 times, you're back. So then over here, it goes from a descending order because I have huge backpacks scaled down to relatively large one. So you'll see the blackjack, then the raid backpack, attack 2, beta, tri-zip, and then it scales from there. So anyway, bagception. Tip, where are we at? Tip number 4. When you're selling stuff, oftentimes you can get cluttered, and I always recommend that don't worry too much about selling stuff to the traders because you need rep from them. They don't rip you off as much as some people say they do. There are certain items they do, so it's worth doing your research if you have the flea market unlocked. But one of the things I would recommend is a selling order. So the trader that pays the most for the stuff that they buy is Therapist. So for the things that Therapist buys, she generally pays the most for. But typically, the order in which I check to sell things to the dealers is first Skier, then I check Mechanic, and then I go to Therapist. And then anything after that, I'll figure it out. But oftentimes, if those 3 don't buy it, usually means it has to go to Fence. So let me show you what I'm talking about, though. If you were to just take, for example, this OP-SKS, this is a gun that I'm probably not going to use, even though it's kitted up and ready to go. If you were to just take this up here, Mechanic's going to have an offer for you. So Mechanic's going to buy this for 71,077 rubles. Now, that's fine, but there's another trick. If you right-click any firearm and disassemble it, it's going to break it down into all of the little parts, and it's going to leave the main receiver of the gun wherever you disassembled it, and it's going to throw the rest of the items up to the top of the inventory, which is why I keep the top of my inventory clean, knowing that I'm going to do this a lot on guns that I bring out of raid to sell. Now, remember, it was 71,000 rubles if we sold it to just Mechanic by himself. So now, if we come here and we go through the order that I talked about, and we sell to Skier first, and you can control left-click an item from your stash into the sell window to quickly do it. So we got 47,000 here for the stuff that Skier will buy, and he will pay the most for gun parts that he will buy, but he doesn't buy all of them. So always go to Skier first, especially if you're disassembling. So 47,000. And then we're going to check Mechanic. We go to the Sell tab. Again, control left click. And he's giving us 30,000. So basically right here, we had 47. We have 30. We made 77,000 instead of 70. So again, couple thousand extra rubles there doing this. Again, I didn't do the exact math. I just know that if you do this, you make more money. So if you have the space, it's always worth it to disassemble and do this. To that point, tip number 5 is everything in Escape from Tarkov can be found in raid, it can be traded for, or it can be bought on the flea market. Now, the reason I say that, and I didn't say that at the very beginning, is you have a choice to make in this game. One is, as you're doing tasks, am I going to keep stuff that I have to find in raid, which means you have to find it while playing the game. You can't buy it from another player or a trader, and save that for a task later, or am I going to wait till the task comes up to get some of that stuff? And there's some tasks you may save stuff, there's some stuff you may not. But the reason I bring that up is most of the time, if you need space in your stash, sell stuff. You can always buy it back later. And as a general rule of thumb, most items will go down in value as a wipe goes on in time because more of that item is available. Now, there are certain things and items that's not true for. Things like graphics cards that in the beginning of the wipe, they're not very expensive. But once people start getting to the late game and getting their hideouts to where they need graphics cards, they become quite expensive. So that's not a hard rule of thumb, but you just know that generally speaking, things get cheaper as time goes on. So If you need space, sell stuff. Don't have fear over selling something that you could buy back later. Tip number 6, most items in the game do not stack. So if you've ever tried to stack up medical supplies, you know that they don't stack. And it seems like, well, if this has 89 hit points of healing and this one has 11, I should be able to stack that to 100. But if you look at this stuff, you can't stack any supplies that have uses. The only items in the game, for the most part, I think it's the only items actually, are paper currency and ammo. Now, currency, you kind of figure out over time that it can stack just because of the way that when you sell stuff, it sort of stacks it for you. But ammo, a lot of times, especially those of you that scav a lot, oftentimes I see people leaving raids and posting screenshots of their raids, and they actually had like 2 or 3 spots where they could have put single slot items, and they had stacks of ammo that could have been stacked up. So ammo does stack. So I see this a lot with shotguns for some reason, where you'll scav in and you'll have like 6 or 7 rounds, or like 3 or 4 stacks of shotgun ammo. So just drag and drop. It stacks. You can do that in your inventory. Make sure when you scav in or you're on your PMC, make sure you're not losing unnecessary looting space that's being taken up by ammo. Okay, and tip number 7, my favorite, and it's one that I didn't know or I messed up for a long time. So 2 things. First, if you are in a situation where maybe it's early game or you're down on money and you're running scav runs on cooldown and you're not really doing PMC raids for some reason, make sure you at least have a backpack and a vest on your PMC, because you can move stuff from your stash onto your PMC and back. So you get a little bit of that extra organizing space. Don't leave your PMC naked when you're trying to organize your stash. So furthermore, one of the things that's really handy is, let's say you have some ammunition up in the top of your stash and you're wanting to move it down to the bottom where you store it. Well, the conventional way is clicking it, dragging all the way down to where you're going to dump it, and dropping it into your ammo case, which again I keep inside of bags, inside of cases, etc. Which again, I don't always recommend this one because I don't know how long they're going to let me keep cases inside of bags, inside of other cases. But the other thing you can do is control left click any item, and it's going to put it into your PMC's inventory immediately. Or if it's a firearm, for example, you can alt left click it and it equips it. If you control left click it, it goes into your inventory on your PMC. So sometimes you want it to go into your bag, sometimes you want it to go straight to your character. So alt left click is default to go onto your character, control left click goes into your bag. Now, if you're moving a bunch of one item, I would highly recommend having space on your PMC so you can control left click it, scroll down, and then you're just dragging those items a short distance to where they're supposed to go. Those are my top tips. You can save a bunch of space doing this, just little tips for quickly organizing your stash. And my one bonus tip for you, if you're one of those people that doesn't know this yet, you can click this little green icon above your handbook, and it gets rid of all of the unsearched items in your handbook, which for me helps my mental state when I'm in my stash. So it's not necessarily an organizing tip, but maybe it'll help you out. Anyway, hope this helps you out. We'll talk to you soon. Have a great one.